Okay, kick us off, hon.
Hi, I'm Sara.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode, Introduction, Who Are We and What Are We Doing?
Sara. What movie are we doing this week?
It's barely a movie. This week we will be talking about 1942's Tennessee Johnson. Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
Trigger warning. This movie contains racism. There are many country people who talk like Boomhauer from King of the Hill, where what they say is unintelligible. Idiot man-children becoming president, and whitewashing of traitors, and abusive portrayals of American heroes in the interest of whitewashing said traitors. Sara, is there anything you can think of that I may have left out?
No, I'm just fucking furious.
Yeah, this is going to be an episode where Sara earns us our explicit rating.
I'm so sorry, Mom. You can turn it off. You don't have to listen to this one. Rena, can you give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
Indeed. Some of the sources used in this episode include, I went to Claude AI and asked it questions about Andrew Johnson, and it gave me a lot of good information, and that's about the level of research this monster deserves.
Yes, so I listened to the 1865 podcasts, which talk about what happened in the immediate aftermath of the Lincoln assassination. I glanced into a biography of our beloved Thaddeus Stevens, and the internet, Wikipedia. We are taping this about 4 days after we taped the Amistad episode, and on the night of Friday, November 8th, 2024.
Nothing matters.
Yeah, basically. So we did enough to confirm what this movie got wrong. This was not an episode like The Duchess, where I had read the subject's authoritative biography a couple times, or The Conqueror, where I read 2 books about what went wrong with the making of the movie, or any one of a number of episodes where I read several books.
This racist apologist piece of trash monster doesn't deserve any, biographical scrutiny or effort. Screw this guy. I hate him.
Sara.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please tell us a little bit about the movie Tennessee Johnson and about our 17th president, Andrew Johnson? I wanted to note here that Tennessee Johnson has been cited by conservatives as an example of liberal censorship. The movie was picketed by the NAACP, and Ben Hecht and Zero Mostel felt that every copy of it should be destroyed.
I agree with them, both on the artistic merits as well as the revisionist trash heap that this movie is. It's not art. It's not history. So a little bit about Andrew Johnson. This bitch was born on December 29th, 1808, and he died on July 31st, 1875. As Rena mentioned, he's the 17th president of the United States. Served from 1865 to 1869. He assumed the presidency following the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, as he was vice president at the time. Johnson was a Democrat who ran with Abraham Lincoln on the National Union Party ticket, coming to office as the Civil War concluded. And a little prologue is future situation here. This is what happens when you try and unify with monsters, everyone. Do not give them quarter. You end up bringing into office a feckless, drunken, racist apologist who's going to pardon all the generals of the Civil War who killed Americans because they wanted to own people in their individual states. Anyway, Tennessee Johnson is a 1942 American film about Mr. Andrew Johnson. It was directed by William Dieterle and written by Milton Gunsberg, Alvin Myers, John Belderson, and Wells Root, probably based on a conversation they had with some like drunken old Civil War veteran in a bar. It appears to be based on nothing resembling fact. It stars Van Heflin as Johnson, Lionel Barrymore as his nemesis, How Dare You movie, Thaddeus Stevens, who you may recall from the Lincoln episode, was Tommy Lee Jones, and Ruth Hussey as First Lady, and history's greatest monster, Eliza McCardle Johnson. And I call her that because she encouraged him and taught him to read, which if she had not done, then we wouldn't have dealt with him. The film depicts the events surrounding Johnson's impeachment and presents its title character as Lincoln's worthy successor who runs afoul of vindictive radical Republicans.
And at this point in history, the Republicans were the good guys. And so, yeah, he ran afoul of people who wanted Black people to be equals and vote. And that was all too much.
Yeah, Johnson proclaims in this movie that he just wants to reunite the Union the way Lincoln did. But what he really wanted was treatment of the former Confederates to be, he offered widespread pardons to former Confederate leaders. He opposed punishing Confederate leaders, believing it would hinder reunification. God forbid anyone ever be held accountable for their actions, because everyone will just get so upset, and we can't have that. He opposed giving Black Americans voting rights. He vetoed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the Freedmen's Bureau Bill, which both of those were overridden by evil Congress, vindictive Republicans who didn't agree with him. These are the people who are the villains in this film. He allowed Southern states to pass, quote, black codes that severely restricted freedmen's rights. He also ordered that the land given to freed slaves by Union forces be returned to former Confederate owners. He opposed proposals to give freed slaves 40 acres and a mule. So he believed in states' rights. He thought Reconstruction policies gave too much power to the federal government. He saw Reconstruction as a punishment of the South rather than a rehabilitation. He also fought against the 14th Amendment. He opposed the Military Reconstruction Act that divided the South into military districts. His vetoes and resistance led to the Republican Radical Reconstruction Program. This put him at odds with the villains of this film, congressional Republicans who wanted more fundamental changes in Southern society and stronger protections for former slaves. The monsters. This is our protagonist.
This was just torture to sit through.
There's no artistic merit to this motion picture. There is no historical value to this. This is like a weird artifact of World War II when we were trying to push like this message of unification, and it's deeply misguided art. William Dieterle, the director, has a wild personal history. He was born in Germany and made German films, and was an actor and director. He immigrated to the U.S. Because of a little bit of political trouble happening in Germany in the 1930s that some of us may be familiar with, which will never darken our doors again because we've all learned from letting fascism rise.
And yes, Sarah, there was a title of one of the films he made in Germany that you found particularly noteworthy.
I did. It was called
Woman in Chains or something.
Sex in Chains.
Sex in Chains.
Yeah. So, and then he came here and made this shit. And then he was kind of like quasi blacklisted for a movie he made that was sympathetic to the Spanish Civil War. Although his ass should have been blacklisted for this. This is garbage.
Yeah.
But he was fine. Like, hashtag don't worry about William Dieterle. He's fine. He had a fine career. He did go back to Germany in the 1950s. He's fine. Wildlife? And I wanted to give all of that up front because we're about to talk through a movie that addresses literally none of that and paints this man as like some sort of combination of simple Jack and as like kind of a second coming of Abraham Lincoln, which offends me so greatly. And I don't know how the Lincoln estate did this since he is a public figure, but Abraham Lincoln is nowhere to be seen in this movie. You never see anything more than a portrait, and he gets name checked.
You see a scene where Lincoln walks into the Houses of Congress to sit in the balcony, but he's in the distance. And then you see the camera zoom in on his top hat, which he puts down, I guess, on a balustrade. And then you sort of see him silhouetted leaning back behind it, but it's mostly focused on the top hat. Know what the deal was to keep Lincoln out of this movie. It's possible they didn't want an actual American hero clouding things up, but yeah, Lincoln not in this movie. So we open on Andrew Johnson has run away from being a tailor's apprentice like Hercules Mulligan in Hamilton, and that is the only thing they have in common. And he has some kind of like, he has this idiot man-child energy to him, we observed.
Yeah, it's very gumpy.
Oh, he says, I didn't learn nothing. Can you learn me?
Yeah, oh, it's awful.
He has this, like, hangdog look about him. He has, like, some kind of shackle around his ankle. And he shows up in this little town, and a dog wanders out and acts affectionate toward him. The people in this town all talk like Boomhauer from King of the Hill. They're all unintelligible. One of them says something about, oh, we haven't had a tailor in this town since someone chopped off his fingers. Or that was what it sounded like.
Yeah, it sounded something like that. It was all very Lil Abner. It's quite like this group of like aw shucksnicks, like Southern racists come out and see the shackle around his ankle, and they're like, we don't see nothing, but we never seen a man sew before.
Yeah. And all he's doing is like sewing a tear in his pants. And someone throws him a file, and they make a big deal out of having the blacksmith, whose name is Mordecai McSomething, get the shackle off of him. And put a pin in that shackle. We'll see it again later.
Fucking Chekhov shackle. And honestly, like, they all look at him like he is a witch because he's sewing, which, show me the lie, Tennessee, you monstrous state of hateful bigots. Yeah, you probably would be very wary of a man who knew how to sew something. So he's kind of like this feral man baby who, because of like the common goodwill of these salt of the earth folk, decides to set up a tailor shop in town, and he meets up with the local librarian lady, his wife, and she is shot. The lighting in this movie is so bananas.
Yeah, the lighting, it's unclear where any of the light comes from based on the angles that it hits people's faces at. It does not appear to be coming from any real source. It's like everyone is in like some weird twilight all the time.
Yeah, it's like if you're not Van Heflin, who's playing Andrew Johnson, and for what it's worth, looks exactly like him, or what's her name?
Ruth Hussey.
Ruth Hussey, the actress playing his wife. They shoot both of them in this sort of like White Diamonds ad kind of like light, and then all of these other yokels are shot like with like lighting that maximizes the pretend absence of teeth. It's a real like lighting nightmare. And she falls in love with him despite the fact that he's a fixer upper. Like, whoa, I mean, he's a fugitive from being in indentured servitude, which, like, put a pin in that irony because of the way he treats real people who are fugitive or who are, indentured servants who will never get their freedom. because they're black, but he is in Tennessee now, so he can't be captured for running away, and starts making dresses for his wife in exchange for her teaching him how to read.
Yeah, and it's like he won't look her in the eye, so his eyes are directed down at her chest.
At this point, I said, like, he's doing what I consider the ultimate insult I can give any actor, which is doing Robert Will face a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just kind of, like, slack-jawed, like, huh. Because she's explaining the Constitution to him. Once again, the greatest crime we've ever committed in this world is letting people think that they can be anything.
Yeah.
We have to stop that, because she starts filling this simpleton, escaped criminal. She's aiding and abetting a fugitive to become a president of the United States, which fortunately that's never going to happen again. So it's all good.
Right.
We have to stop filling mediocre white men's brains with the idea that they are smart and capable of doing anything.
And the language when they talk about the Constitution and the Declaration and Rights is just so cloying and hokey and sentimental. I gagged a number of times.
Yeah, and he keeps saying, like, I'm poor white trash.
I know, what was the term they used? Mudslip? Milsop?
Thing.
Mudslip, a term we'd never heard before.
It means the lowest class. So she starts letting him read from the Constitution and the Declaration the Declaration of Independence.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden he goes from simpleton mouth breather to like educated, thoughtful, intelligent man of the people. And he starts, she's like, you can be a leader. You can go lecture men. And so that's what he starts doing. He just, I guess, just shows up at the town square every week and lectures everyone about how people who don't own land should have the right to vote.
Which I agree with. Yeah, people who don't own land. And at this, somewhere around this point, the like sheriff or whoever the property owners in the town are show up and get mad about it. And that is when we see the first black person who we do not get a full view of. We will take it he is owned by the rich men in the town, and we see him arranging a blanket over their knees. And yeah, I think I counted a total of 4 black people.
It's interesting to have just watched Lincoln and see the real Thaddeus Stevens as portrayed in that film, which I do believe to be more truthful than this. The real Thaddeus Stevens in 1865 treated black people better than Hollywood did in 1942. Certainly this movie is part of that, where, you know, Thaddeus Stevens has a housekeeper who in the movie Lincoln, he had a much different relationship with, who is like butterfly McQueening all over this movie. On the list of offenses of this movie, I don't even know if I can get into that, because like there's so many other like macro aggressions taking place.
So there's some kind of altercation, and he takes a gun to the meeting, and his friend Mordecai the blacksmith dies, and they start yelling for him to run for office. Can you clarify this?
I want to start by saying that this was, I think, my favorite moment in the film. So, broad Southern woman talking about fingers getting cut off comes out of everyone's going in to tend to Mordecai, comes out of that room where everybody's waiting around to see if he's okay, and says, anyone interested in opening a blacksmith shop, because Mordecai's dead. It was like, well, that's a way to share that news with everybody. Bravo. They're all going to like pick up pitchforks and go murder the sheriff or something, which is, of course, going to result in the local guard coming. Like, it's going to just become a problem and everyone's going to die. So Andrew Johnson's all, no, we cannot do this. We have to follow the laws. All of a sudden, he's like Mahatma Gandhi, preaching peace and following the rule of law. He's like, I will soon own land, and then you can elect me as sheriff. And everyone says, that's a great idea. You could become the sheriff. And Mercifully, at this point, we skip ahead to 1860. And we have one of the men who was going to take an axe to the sheriff. He is still alive, and he is in the community, and he's introducing Andrew Johnson back to the community as the senator, and everyone's applauding. And I was like, how dare you continue to elect this man to office and give him more power?
Yeah. They don't give any indication of what year it's supposed to be at first, which is, I believe, 1827. So we don't realize that 33 years that it's been a good 30 years or so. We know he married her. We know she had the kid. And then it skips ahead. All of the children in this movie are adorable.
They are. The children are so cute. I will also give it that.
Yes, but it's also the wardrobe in this just looks like they had stuff that was in the big old wardrobe closet at the studio where they were like 19th century, and like I guess there is a bit of a class differentiation in what the wife is wearing in the early scenes and what she has on as first lady later, but there isn't any differentiation between like what 1827 looks like and what 1860 looks like. Even if they are supposed to be poor, there's like subtle differences and waistlines being in different places, different shapes. You don't realize how much time is passing.
No, and it's fine. Like, honestly, I wished that at 1860 they took 10 minutes and then skipped ahead 30 years to when he's dead. But they didn't do that. We linger in this window of time for the rest of the film. Mm-hmm. And it is unmerciful. He's talking about how he doesn't want secession to happen. They're in Congress, and he's talking about that, how everyone needs to keep their cool, and the South should, keep calm and carry on and focus on policies that will, cripple and get Abraham Lincoln voted out in 1864 rather than seceding. And then like all this sort of school play stuff starts happening where Jefferson Davis shows up, hero of the Confederacy. Oh my God. And Jefferson Davis.
Yeah, Jefferson Davis makes a long speech where they light him heroically and he's speaking so solemnly. And then all the other senators get up and leave. And it's like, no, you should not be portraying Jefferson Davis heroically or giving him any credence. And there's this one last old Southern senator who's slowly getting up. And I swear this man looked like Beast from the X-Men movies that came out about 20 years ago with the way that his facial hair is arranged. And he slowly gets up from the desk. He takes out a small book. He takes out another thing. And then you see him slowly stroking the top of this desk with that. It looks, that is the one moment we thought, this looks like the work of a German director.
And it's not the last time this movie will be obnoxious about this, where it portrays, seceding from the Union to fight a war against your fellow Americans so you can own people, like it is a poignant duty to be done by the South, which can we not do this anymore?
Yes,
and I
because
hate
we
it.
have these sentimental portrayals of it. This stupid lost cause attitude.
So Andrew Johnson is going to stay, and he is called a traitor by his fellow traitors for not leaving the Senate. And who cares? He'll be fine. He'll let them all back in without a big deal later on, because that's what he thinks is the right thing, because he's a fucking monster. He volunteers to go help Lincoln. Like, he says, I'll go be a general in Tennessee, and he's heroic or something. Who cares?
We have no idea. I think he was military governor at some point. We don't know why he's in a uniform or what the heck is going on, or he talks about holding Nashville, but we're not given much context. And then it's 1864, Lincoln is reelected, and he's vice president.
History will argue that this was a pretty bad miscalculation on Abraham Lincoln's part to bring him onto the ticket, because it was supposed to be reflective of unity, and it was supposed to support Lincoln getting reelected to sort of present this unified front of people who were going to heal the nation after the Civil War. Anyway, the point is that he brought in this ass clown, drunk, racist monster to be his vice president, and didn't have the foresight to know that he was going to be assassinated by another monster. So yeah, great job, Lincoln. I will say that was your miscalculation, and it's a shame. And Andrew Johnson is all, Mr. Lincoln doesn't want vengeance. And evil Thaddeus Stevens shows up and is talking about how, the people who left the country so that they could continue to hold people in bondage to work for them. He's portrayed as evil for thinking that there should be any sort of consequences for those choices, for fighting against your own country.
Oh, I can tell you what the consequences should be. They should have an enforced cultural overhaul until every last one of them is ashamed of themselves or their ancestors ever having taken any pride in the Confederacy.
These people should have all been hung by the neck until they died because they were traitors. The end. It's this nightmarish bullshit story about Lincoln wanting to be like deeply forgiving, which he did have a notion of putting forth a policy that was a little bit more generous than I think would have been useful, but it also wasn't to the degree that Johnson eventually enacted. Like, he wanted it to be a swift and moderate process. He wanted to allow Confederate states to rejoin by pledging loyalty to the Union, abolishing slavery, and requiring only 10% of their voters to take a loyalty oath. And this was known as the 10% plan. And he was prioritizing reconciliation and reuniting the nation. So yeah, like technically Lincoln wanted this, but it's difficult to speculate as to like what he would have ultimately been. Lincoln probably would have taken a more educated approach to it, but we don't know.
So what next in this vale of tears? He's sworn in, and this is a thing that actually happened. Andrew Johnson was drunk and unintelligible in his speech. You found the text for this.
There is, much to my delight, an entire Wikipedia page about the time that Andrew Johnson was drunk when he made his inaugural address as Vice President of the United States. So multiple sources suggest he had been drunk for at least a week prior, drank heavily the night before the inauguration, consumed a bunch of whiskey the morning of the ceremony. Witnesses variously describe Johnson's speech as hostile, inane, incoherent, repetitive, self-aggrandizing, and sloppy. Thank God that's never disqualified anyone from office. He kissed the Bible when he took the oath of office, and he was too drunk to administer the oath of office to incoming senators.
Great.
It's a weird comfort to know that the office of the executive branch has been besmirched and humiliated by other monsters in history. I did find a transcription of the speech that he gave, and it was written out as it sounded. And
I'd like to hear this, Sarah.
Okay. Fel citizens, this most suspicious moment of my existence in may say my life in the mirror swear lessons dob do don sport concussion and seat concussion sported tallies do no yum my name and Johnson v. Tennessee, and I'm a Pullian old Debs, Palian, Pleen, and the Constitution just, 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 and the Constitution just Constitutions. The Constitution's a striking sermon in flare before sands that fear no Marcella man, brother American citizen, and I'm a proud illustration of the fact that fleeing a man from the ranks can be the second with giving the place of the American people. Fellow citizens, I'm a playing in 2 minutes now from the point for I'm a playing Antoine time was Taylor's boy near Taylor with rail planes in Old Dave and the Supreme Court driving constant drive power with from American planes. But is on that point. Tennessee's Al has been long glory dressing my fellow to instead on that point.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
True story from Sarah's life. My parents would not allow me to, and nor would I have gotten into it, wouldn't have been a thing, audition for Juilliard. However, had I known that this existed, I would have absolutely used that as my audition monologue. Probably in front of Zoe Caldwell at Juilliard. And I think I would have gotten in. Thoughts?
What does this even mean?
I don't know. There is a translation, like a rough translation, also on this Wikipedia page, which I think we should link to in our show notes, because honestly, this Wikipedia page is the hero of the episode. But this was one newspaper's heroic verbal transcription of what they heard, and journalism is not dead, my friends.
Yes. And also Georges Clemenceau, the future leader of France, shows up in this. He was a journalist at this point, and he's in the cast list, but I couldn't figure out who Clemenceau was supposed to be, since I know more about the Second World War than the First.
Tennessee's always been loyal, glory, and dressing my felt to for missing on that point, is what I have to say to that. It was beautiful, wasn't it?
Our beloved Thaddeus Stevens is played by Lionel Barrymore, who modern audiences remember as Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. He is also in a wheelchair in this because Lionel Barrymore broke his hip at some point and got arthritis, so they started finding excuses to put him into a wheelchair.
He's excellent in this movie.
He is, and he gives you a sense that Thaddeus Stevens believes in what he's doing, which, yes, he very much should. Speed us through the rest of this monstrosity, because my head is a stew, and no amount of ice cream can fix it.
After this disastrous inaugural address, or greatest moment in history, you decide, Andrew Johnson is taken to his bed, and like the whitewashing that happens here is that he was ill, and he was given a bit of brandy to help his illness, and because he didn't drink, he quote didn't drink, he wasn't prepared for the alcohol, and it made him drunk. And it was very like Donna Martin at the prom for 90210 fans, like where it was just dangerous, tragic happenstance that he happened to be drunk at this moment. And Lincoln supposedly sent him a nice letter saying that it was okay that this happened and that he loves him anyway. And how fucking dare you, movie?
Yeah, that Lincoln says, I know that you were drunk because you never drank. 90210 reference, have no idea what you're talking about. I was not allowed to watch Beverly Hills 90210 or Melrose Place.
Well, Donna got drunk at the prom, and she wasn't supposed to.
Well, yeah, they're teenagers. It's illegal. Yeah. But anyway...
then Lincoln gets shot.
Yes.
Spoiler alert.
So, IRL, no, Andrew Johnson was a big drunk. And also, in this, it's shown that he's at home with his wife. In real life, Andrew Johnson was with a prostitute on the night of the Lincoln assassination. Her name was Ella Starr, and she was also seeing John Wilkes Booth.
That man was such a whore.
Yeah, he was a dog. He was a big man-ho because he was also, as I mentioned in our Lincoln episode, another woman he was seeing was Lucy Hale, the daughter of Senator Hale, a prominent abolitionist, and Lucy Hale was Robert Lincoln's fiancée.
This is such messy shit from a time before birth control.
Yeah.
So Lincoln's dead, and now he's the president. And he's writing a bunch of stuff and getting pep talks from his freaking wife about how he deserves to be there. And I don't like that this movie is acting like an aw shucks person gets in the White House. I think like exactly one aw shucks person has become president, and that was Jimmy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone else, no matter how good or bad of a person they are, is pretty sure they deserve to be president.
Yeah.
Like they're like, yeah, I earned this. Whether they did or not is for history to decide. But I don't think you don't become president because you have a lack of ego.
No.
But this movie pretends that Andrew Johnson is just, like simple fugitive from his indentured servitude who happened to fall into power quite by accident.
Not to mention he had the love of a good woman who believed in him.
The history's greatest monster.
You're right.
This woman. How dare she? Like, so he's gonna be the president now, and Thaddeus Stevens and a couple of other evil Republicans who want Reconstruction to have consequences and to be managed carefully and not be a free-for-all show up to villain all over the place.
What are these men guilty of other than wanting to create a world that you and I would want to live in?
And Johnson is just insisting over and over, this is not what we wanted. We fought a war to preserve the Union, and now you're going to pretend that it didn't exist, is what he says. And it's like, JK about all those people we killed.
Johnson did not want to pass the 14th Amendment.
No. I mean, Johnson, like aside from whether or not we wanted to have a gentlemanly process of bringing the states back in, he also wanted a whole bunch of racist stuff to happen, as I mentioned up top. Whether or not he wanted those people to be pardoned, outside of that, he was still like, we need to make it really awful for Black people to be free, and we need to make it a free-for-all.
Yeah, at some point in this, Stevens comes over to the White House and is sweet and charming with Johnson's grandchildren.
What happens next is he starts threatening Johnson and is basically like, we'll impeach your ass, which they should.
Yeah.
Because he breaks the law.
I hate what they do to Stanton here, because if you listen to the 1865 podcast, which is excellent, Stanton was a canny player who, I don't know what cards were left, but it was really important to him to have a real reconstruction that got rid of more of the vestiges of slavery, and but it's sort of heroic the way that he had walled himself in his office for weeks and he couldn't bathe or anything.
Yeah, and Stanton was wrongly dismissed from his job. There was a rule on the books that Andrew Johnson was not supposed to fire certain members of the cabinet anyway. So this sets up the big final conflict of the movie.
Yeah. Among highlights, Johnson is shown coming into Congress and making a speech that he never made. There's another speech that he does called "Why Are These Desks Empty?" where he's pointing to the desks of the Southern Congress people, and it's well, yes, these desks are empty because they were held by motherfucking traitors who wanted to own people. good reason for them to be empty.
Yeah, you know what they did? They got up and they left. That's why those desks are empty. Stop acting as if like we're not making enough overtures to people who got up and left because they were in a snit because they needed to fucking own people.
Lionel Barrymore is doing his best. Everyone else is just showing up, and it's just, on top of all of this, it's incredibly dull. They're acting like it's noble to pardon Lee and Davis when no, they should both have been hung. And the Senate is applauding for the speech he never made. There's some business where that again didn't happen, where there's some congressman who's dying that they bring back in to cast a vote that changes the thing. And again, didn't happen. The name that they use is a guy who was in Congress who had died like in 1859 or something.
Like you want me to see Andrew Johnson as a noble, heroic character while Lionel Barrymore is twisting his mustache and he's literally saying, like, I am pardoning Robert E. Lee right now. I am writing out the pardon because that is the honorable thing to do and that's the right thing to do and we're supposed to be a union. And I am like, what are we doing, movie? Like, stop this.
And this is how Lincoln would have wanted it. And then insult upon insult as it gets into the final scene. They're all thanking him in front of the Senate, and you hear them playing Battle Cry of FreeDumb, the song that everyone was singing in Lincoln when they passed the 13th Amendment. And this was one of the many points where we just exploded. There was stuff that happened that's too boring to recount, but you basically got the gist of it. This movie should not be for anybody.
He keeps putting, like, he at one point, like, he reads that letter that Lincoln supposedly wrote him after he was on a bender on the Senate floor being inaugurated into office because he was a scumbag.
I think you yelled something similar to what Will Smith yelled at Chris Rock before hitting him at the Academy Awards, like, keep something's name out your mouth.
Yes, I was like, you keep that beautiful man's words out of your filthy racist whore mouth.
Yes.
Which, I'm sorry, like, I mean, I just keep seeing, like, beautiful Daniel Day-Lewis in my mind. I keep thinking about the scene with George Yeaman where he's talking to him about how they're going to figure this shit out. And then now I'm watching this trash fire about what actually happens because we kill the people who are trying to do good and we destroy them. And then we elevate and preserve the legacies of these fucking monsters.
I know.
I hate it here.
I think you're upsetting the cat. She's been distant the whole evening.
You're right. And fair, like, I'm being very scary right now. And at one point in the speech, he talks about how long ago the fighting stopped, and I'm like, there's people probably still trying to figure out if their kids are dead at this point. It's such an affront to all of the people who died fighting to preserve the Union, to just let all these racist monsters just back in with no issue whatsoever. And let them continue to run roughshod over Black people for 100 more years, as we see in All the Way. If we're going to say, like, long ago the fighting stopped, and it's like, it's been like 2 Christmases, motherfucker.
Well, it's also that we made revisionist garbage like this that sentimentalized the South.
Can we not sentimentalize the South anymore? I just watched a movie where 3 college students get murdered by a bunch of, like, Cletuses who don't want Black people to have the right to vote in the year of our Lord 1964.
Yeah. So I had no choice dialogue for this movie. The parts where it's trying to be eloquent when he's talking about the Constitution are just like, I mean, you often saw me sticking a finger into my throat going, ah.
I mean, the original sin of this movie is acting as if Andrew Johnson is anyone admirable, which he is not.
We don't have awards talk this week.
No, this movie won no awards. and it was a box office bomb, all of which is right and just.
So is there anything else we're supposed to do before we score this thing?
No, but I think, like, let's light a candle for Zero Mostel, who probably put his early career at great risk to say that this movie shouldn't exist.
This movie is a piece of trash.
Yes.
Sarah, can you please give our listeners a quick refresher about how we score movies?
Woo! Okay. So, we rate movies on a 1 to 10 scale across 10 areas that we find to be subjectively and or objectively important to most films, but specially tailored to specific issues particular to biopics. If you want more details on how we score movies, please scroll down our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com. You'll also find a record of our scores for past episodes.
I would also highly recommend listening to our special introductory episode, Introduction, Who Are We and What Are We Doing? Where we give a rundown of the methodology, why it matters to us, and some of the inspirations behind this podcast.
And with that out of the way, let's score this thing.
We're trying something new this week, which is we're just going to read everything off and then reflect on it to get through this part a little bit faster.
We tend to
wind up repeating things we've said before.
You know I'm mad. I don't think I need to say that again.
Yes, starting from the top, Sarah.
Outward appearances, 3. Acting and casting, 2. Passage of time, 2. Costuming, 3. Quality of the script, 1. Accuracy, 0. Storytelling, 2. Production value, 3. Production direction decision making, 1. Do we care? 0. And I did ask if I could go lower than a 0, which I could not. And I am using my buy for the first time in 20 plus episodes. My total score in average was a 1.7. My buy takes it down to a 0.7. And that is still too high.
Okay. So for outward appearances, 4. For acting and casting, 3, because I had to give some credit to Lionel. Passage of time, 2. Costuming, 4. Quality of the script, 2. Accuracy, 2. Storytelling, 0. Production value, 4. Production direction decision making, 1. Again, credit for casting Lionel Barrymore. And do we care? 0. I opposite of cared, which brings my total to 2.2. Brings our total score to 1.45, which I believe is the same score we gave The Conqueror.
Conqueror looks like Lawrence of Arabia compared to this movie.
I wish I'd used the buy. So, congratulations, Tennessee Johnson. You have earned a second opinion at 1.45.
He stole this element from How Did This Get Made? So movies that get above an 8 or below a 4, you get to hear us read a couple of reviews from the internet of people who strongly disagreed with the way that we viewed this film. There weren't a lot of options.
Not a lot of people have seen this movie, and we can see why.
No one should see this movie.
So I will read this next review titled Brilliant in all caps, written by Theognis 80821 on February 20th of 2023. Historical accuracy and interpretations aside, Tennessee Johnson, thanks to superb screenwriter John L. Balderston, is the most suspenseful, involving, and well-structured Washington, D.C. melodrama this side of Gore Vidal's The Best Man, 1964. At 103 minutes, it's a marvel of the kind of concision rarely seen today, ranging through the course of a man's life from illiterate runaway slave to President of the United States to U.S. Senator. Under the skillful direction of William Dieterle, Van Heflin stars in the title role, ably supported by Ruth Hussey as his teacher and wife and an outstanding studio cast. Dieterle's staging and pacing are wonderful. It should inspire research into the history of the period In the same way, Vidal's film casts light on some of the prime issues of the 1950s and the inner workings of our constitutional republic. He wasn't a slave. It says 103 minutes. I'll take its word. It felt more like 301 minutes, maybe 200 minutes at least. But how do you feel about this comparison of the script to anything by Gore Vidal that Gore Vidal put his name on?
I feel like it's proof that this guy has seen 2 movies. And they're both about Washington, D.C. And I'm kind of like, suspenseful how? Like, suspenseful?
No.
Was it suspenseful?
It's not suspenseful when the suspense is, am I going to fall asleep in the next 3 minutes or in the next 5?
I mean, and also, like, it's kind of amazing to ascribe suspense to a piece of history that most people, let me rephrase that some people know about, because we live in a country full of fucking idiots, but it's not exactly like the usual suspects.
So we have one more review here. Interesting biopic by Hot Toasty Rag, written on September 2nd of 2023. Will you do the honors, Sarah?
Of course. When we first meet Tennessee Johnson, he's an ignorant hick who makes a living as a tailor. He's illiterate and never seen the need to learn until he meets Ruth Hussey. She's a librarian with class and education, and he offers to mend her clothes for free if she'll teach him to read. It's humiliating for him to ask a woman for that kind of help, and the look in Van Heflin's eyes just breaks your heart. Andrew Johnson's life is a truly incredible story. So is this movie.
What?
If you don't know anything about him, you'll be sitting on the edge of your seat.
No.
Van Heflin does a wonderful job, and as he rises higher in the social strata, you can still see his rough edges and background. He doesn't just become a politician and feel comfortable in starched collars. He remembers where he came from and feels compelled to lead the people because of the injustices all around him. Not slavery. It's a very layered performance, but because of the unpopularity of the president he portrays, he didn't receive any accolades or acclaim. At the Hot Toasty Rag Awards, we were proud to nominate Van for Best Actor. I have questions, but we'll just put a pin in that.
There are no Hot Toasty Rag Awards, thank God.
Lionel Barrymore plays Lionel Barrymore plays President Johnson's savvy nemesis, Thaddeus Stevens, and as usual, he's wonderfully likable as a villain. Even as you're rooting for Van, Lionel will make you chuckle as he snakes his way through the screen. You'll also see in the supporting cast Charles Dingle, Noah Barry, Montague Love.
Who?
Russell Hicks.
Who?
Regis Tommy.
Who?
Marjorie Mann.
Who?
Louis Beavers.
Oh, it says Louise.
Sorry.
Who?
Louise Beavers. And early appearances by character actors Ray Teal and Jeff Corey.
Who?
I definitely recommend this movie if you like political biopics or dramas surrounded by the Civil War. Not many have been made of Andrew Johnson. I don't know who any of these people are.
No, me neither.
So yeah, it's a supporting cast of
people.
I guess it's that guy. It's the supporting cast this movie deserves.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when you think about like the Lincoln supporting cast.
Oh my God.
And then this, I'm like, this is the supporting cast this movie deserves.
We've been on a descending scale of quality all month, but like between Amistad and this was such a drop.
I can't believe you found this movie. I can't believe it exists.
I pitched this because I wanted to do a movie about a garbage fire of a president. And this is definitely a movie about a garbage fire president. And I thought we might want to blow off steam by yelling about how much we hated a movie.
Yep.
And this seemed very hateable. And
Accurate. So,
Sarah, is there other stuff that you would recommend that our audiences watch instead of this movie? Because first, please watch Lincoln, not this. You could watch the PBS Civil War.
Oh, it's so good.
Yes. So many better things have been made about the Civil War.
I mean, you could watch literally anything and it would be better than this. Arliss, the Robert Wuhl series, is apparently streaming on Max. And I think we all know how I feel about Robert Wuhl, and I'd rather watch anything with him than watch this movie again. There's a dark web, and there are snuff films available on it if you want to take one of those in. I've heard. I have not seen any of that. I would also, like this week, I am picking up my copy of When Things Fall Apart, written by Padma Shaskran, which is helpful in challenging times.
Yes, I'm on the third book now of the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden, where it's sort of a fairy tale / historical fantasy set in Russia around the middle of the 14th century. And I've just kind of been racing through it, and it's delightful, especially the first book in the series. The only good thing I can think of about Russia right now is that it's folklore inspired this particular series. And Tolstoy has nothing to do with this, but Tolstoy, even like the theory of history chapters in War and Peace that I've always skipped, I'd rather sit down and read all of those than watch this again.
I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Yeah.
It was very cathartic for us to yell.
Yes.
And whatnot.
And we did yell a lot. I posted our very first Instagram reel, which is of Sarah yelling at the screen. Sarah, can you take us out?
Sure. If you like the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can follow us on Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our Instagram handle is @BioPicAPodcastStory. So do check us out there, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Please also check out our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com to see the official episode ratings for all of the movies that we've done so far. If you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking about Priscilla.
Yay! Back to child brides.
Yay! She was only 16. Only 16.
She was only 13, wasn't she?
She was 14 when they met. You're 14. You're beautiful. And you're mine. We need actual outro music and intro music.
We do.
Have a great week, everybody. And we'll have another one of these things coming at you in 7 days. Probably.
Yeah.